The projection screen still glimmered with my findings when they all rose in unison. 12 executives stood at once, a synchronized motion so precise it felt practiced, their chairs scraping backward in a harsh chorus. Irritation twisted across their faces, layered with open contempt, as if the data itself had personally offended them. My voice faltered halfway through a sentence outlining the escalating defect rates, the words dying in my throat as the room turned against me. "We're finished listening to her shortcomings," Baxter, the COO, announced flatly, projecting the confidence of a man convinced accountability was something that happened to other people. His voice carried that familiar, dismissive timbre reserved for subordinates who had forgotten their place. "This presentation is a complete waste of valuable time." The soft whisper of expensive fabric filled the air as they gathered tablets, folders, and styluses. Not one of them met my eyes. Their silence wasn't accidental, it was deliberate, calculated to amplify the humiliation. "The numbers speak for themselves," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, refusing to let it crack. Our customers are perfectly satisfied," Vivian cut in smoothly. Her smile stayed fixed, professional and cold, as if she were delivering a compliment instead of a dismissal. "Perhaps you should reconsider whether you're suited for this level of responsibility." They moved toward the door as a cluster, shoulders nearly touching, a united front. The click of Italian leather shoes echoed far too loudly in the sudden quiet, each step punctuating the reality of what was happening. 12 executives, the entire leadership team, walking out together while I stood frozen, hands still raised toward the projected charts and graphs, the evidence of their negligence glowing behind me, like an accusation they refused to face. Monroe, the CFO, lingered behind as the others exited. He paused in the doorway, fingers hovering near the light switch, watching me with detached curiosity. "Don't bother finishing," he said. "No one will read your report." Then he flicked the lights off, plunging the room into near darkness, leaving only the cold illumination of my damning presentation washing over the walls. 30 seconds passed in that muted space. My heartbeat slowed, shifting from frantic dread into something harder, more controlled. The sting of betrayal crystallized into resolve. I had anticipated this response, almost depended on it. Their public dismissal wasn't a surprise, it was confirmation of every suspicion I'd been building for months. I reached for my phone, scrolled to a number I'd saved weeks earlier but prayed I wouldn't need, and pressed call. When she answered, I spoke 7 words that would change everything. "They did exactly what you said they would." "All of them?" the voice asked. "Every single one, and it's all recorded." There was a brief pause. "Give me 4 hours." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, staring up at the data still cast across the screen. The quality failures, the falsified tests, the deliberate cover-ups. Everything they believed would remain buried. Before we continue, thank you for being part of this journey. If you're finding this story compelling so far, tap that like button to help others discover it. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. Believe me, you won't want to miss how this unravels. My name is Leona. Until 3 months ago, I served as Director of Quality Assurance at one of the nation's top industrial equipment manufacturers. Our products were installed in hospitals, schools, and government buildings nationwide, the kind of equipment people trusted implicitly with their safety. I wasn't always someone who challenged powerful figures. Growing up in a small factory town taught me early that systems were flawed, but truth still carried weight. My father spent 30 decades at the local plant, coming home with stories of warnings ignored and corners cut. When that factory closed after a preventable disaster, I promised myself I would never stay quiet when lives were at stake. My reputation grew from that promise. I fixed broken systems without burning companies to the ground. I became known as someone who delivered solutions, not scandals. That's why they recruited me. We need someone with your integrity, Baxter told me during my final interview, his smile reassuring. Minor inefficiencies have crept in. Fresh eyes are all we need. My predecessor, Tomas, had left abruptly. Health issues, they said. No one spoke comfortably about him. When I requested his records, I received vague explanations about a personalized system that hadn't transferred properly. The first warning sign appeared during my initial plant tour. Nadia, a quality technician with 8 years at the company, guided me with rigid precision. Her answers sounded rehearsed until we reached the testing lab. When I asked about validation protocols, her eyes darted briefly to a camera mounted in the corner before she replied, voice tight, "We follow established company procedures." Later that week, I uncovered test results that didn't align with manufacturing output. Equipment failing critical safety checks had been approved and shipped. When I presented this to my team, they avoided eye contact, fear etched into their silence. Just follow established protocols, Baxter told me when I requested a private meeting. Previous leadership complicated things unnecessarily. The next day, an unexplained bonus appeared in my account, far exceeding my contract terms. I rejected it and kept digging. Patterns emerged quickly. Our flagship medical equipment line carried serious safety defects that were being intentionally concealed. Testing procedures were modified, complaints were redirected and buried. The issue isn't the product, Vivian insisted during a private discussion. It's unrealistic user expectations. Not when those errors put people at risk, I replied. She slid a revised contract across the table, complete with a substantial raise and an aggressive confidentiality clause. "We reward team players," she said, tapping the signature line. I told her I'd consider it. Then I gathered more proof. That night, an anonymous email arrived containing older safety reviews altered in our system. The note was short. Tomas wasn't sick. On the morning of my board presentation, Nadia stood beside my car in the garage. "They're setting you up," she whispered. "They've already signed your termination papers." When I asked why she was telling me, her voice shook. Because Tomas tried to do the right thing too. Before the meeting, I made one critical change to my presentation, removing a single slide with the most damning evidence and reserving it for another purpose. After the executives walked out, I remained seated in the darkened room. The call I placed wasn't to a journalist or a lawyer. It was to Eliza, the regulatory investigator who had been quietly building a case for months. I sent her everything, the walkout, the comments, the references to past incidents. "Perfect," she said calmly. "That's what we needed." 2 hours later, as I walked back toward my office, the halls felt heavy with anticipation. My door stood slightly open. Inside, Vivian sat in my chair, turning my monitor toward herself. "That was quite a spectacle," she said coolly. I set my materials down and met her gaze. "Your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out in 20 minutes. Whatever you've gathered stays here, including your personal notes." Her gaze sharpened. "Everything. The company owns all work product created during your time here." "I understand," I answered calmly. Something in my steady response made her suspicious. "This isn't a negotiation, Leona. You've made enemies who never forget. People with influence across the entire industry. Is that a threat? It's reality. Your career ended the moment you chose to oppose this team." She moved toward the door. "Though I admire your principles, misguided as they are." "Principles don't carry much weight compared to the unanimous opinion of 12 executives," I said. She halted at the doorway. "Exactly. No one will believe your word over ours." After she left, I sat down and opened my desk drawer. Inside was a small device that had recorded every conversation in my office for the past 10 weeks. I slid it into my pocket just as my phone buzzed with a message from Eliza. "We're ahead of schedule. 9 agents arriving now. Meet in lobby in 10. I gathered my personal belongings, just enough to appear compliant without drawing attention. As I walked through the department, my team watched with expressions ranging from sympathy to dread. Some understood what was coming. Others thought they were witnessing my final downfall. Nadia hurried toward me near the elevator. "They're saying you tried to blame production for design failures," she whispered. "Baxter's already announcing your replacement." "Are they?" I pressed the down button. Convenient timing. "What are you going to do?" Her voice quivered. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. "Sometimes," I said, stepping inside, "you let people believe they've won before they discover they've already lost." The lobby buzzed with afternoon activity when the glass doors swung open. 4 individuals in dark suits entered, led by Eliza herself. Her badge was clearly visible as she strode to the security desk. "Regulatory Enforcement Division," she announced, her voice echoing across the marble floor. "We have a warrant to access company records and conduct interviews." The guard looked startled, reaching for his phone. Within minutes, the lobby transformed into controlled chaos. Employees stopped to stare, phones lifted. Someone from legal rushed down, demanding documentation. I stood near reception, watching as Eliza presented the papers and outlined the situation with clinical clarity. Her team moved toward the elevators, flanked by unsettled legal staff. Baxter appeared red-faced, muttering orders to a junior attorney who looked increasingly overwhelmed. When he spotted me, his expression slipped from fury into cold suspicion. He stormed over, positioning himself directly in my line of sight. "I hope you understand what you've done," he said quietly. "This little stunt will ruin more than your career." "That sounds serious," I replied. "Perhaps you should share those thoughts with the agents upstairs." His face tightened. "You signed confidentiality agreements." "Anything I provided was shared through proper regulatory channels," I finished calmly. "Nothing outside standard reporting requirements." The color drained from his face as the meaning sank in. I hadn't leaked anything to the press or rivals. I had simply followed mandatory procedures they had avoided for years. "You have no idea what forces you're provoking," he murmured. "This company has survived far worse than one disgruntled employee." I smiled, holding his gaze. "I'm not disgruntled, Baxter. I'm doing exactly what you hired me to do, ensuring quality standards are upheld." Something in my expression rattled him. He took a small step back. "Security will escort you out now." "Actually," said a voice behind him, "Miss Leona will remain to assist our investigation." Eliza stood there, badge raised. "We have additional questions regarding the presentation that was interrupted earlier today." The next 4 hours unfolded like a meticulously orchestrated operation. Agents swept through the building, securing servers and documents. Executives were separated for questioning. Employees watched wide-eyed as years of deception unraveled in real time. I sat in a conference room, not the same one from earlier, answering questions and offering context as Eliza's team assembled their case. Through the glass walls, I saw the dawning realization spread across the office as timelines and connections filled entire whiteboards. At 4:30, Monroe, the CFO, was escorted from his office, ashen and silent. By 5:15, 8 more executives followed, not in handcuffs but clearly stripped of control. As they passed the conference room where I sat with Eliza, Baxter locked eyes with me. The recognition flickering across his face, the realization that the woman they'd dismissed as incompetent had unraveled their entire operation was almost worth the 3 months of anxiety, gaslighting, and pressure. But this was only the beginning. What none of them realized yet was that by tomorrow morning their carefully engineered house of cards would collapse completely, far faster and far more devastatingly than any of them could imagine. The evidence gathered today was merely one fragment of a far larger puzzle, one that had been assembling itself for years before I ever stepped foot here. The full magnitude of what was approaching wouldn't be understood until the emergency board meeting set for 8 a.m. By that point, it would be too late for cleanup, too late for attorneys, too late for anything except watching their carefully engineered empire crumble into ashes, and I intended to witness it every second of it. The following morning arrived with the strange brightness that follows life-shifting moments. I dressed with practiced precision, charcoal gray suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back tightly. Today wasn't about presenting myself. It was about watching accountability materialize. Sleep had avoided me, but adrenaline offered flawless focus. 3 months of meticulous documentation, calculated alliances, and patient strategy were about to converge in this emergency board session. The corporate headquarters appeared different in the early sunlight, almost exposed. Security had been intensified with unfamiliar guards checking IDs at every entrance. News vans waited along the perimeter, held back by temporary barricades. Miss Leona, a woman I didn't recognize, greeted me at the executive entry. I am Zoe, assistant to the board chair. You're expected upstairs. The executive floor was unnervingly still. Glass offices that normally hummed with energy stood empty, their occupants noticeably absent. Computer monitors displayed login screens that would never again greet their usual users. Zoe guided me to a small room beside the main boardroom. Through a partially open door, I saw people gathering. Grim expressions, hurried murmurs, untouched glasses of water. Wait here, Zoe instructed. The chair will call you in once they're ready. Alone, I checked my phone. A message from Eliza. Second phase underway now. 9 search warrants executing at once. I smiled. Impeccable timing. From the boardroom, voices rose. Someone demanded explanations. Another insisted on legal counsel. A third voice, steady and authoritative, cut through the uproar. This meeting will come to order, declared Edmund, the board chair. We're facing unprecedented accusations that demand immediate response. The door swung open. Edmund, a silver-haired man with analytical eyes, motioned to me. Please join us, Miss Leona. The boardroom held 23 individuals, the full 12-member board, several senior executives who had skipped my presentation the day before, and a cluster of stern-faced attorneys. The 3 vacant chairs at the main table stood out sharply. For those unfamiliar with her, this is Leona, our Quality Assurance Director, or rather our former director, according to termination documents apparently filed yesterday afternoon, forms I never authorized. Murmurs rippled across the chamber as Edmund went on. Leona has chosen to present her findings directly to the board before speaking with federal investigators later today. Baxter, seated rigidly at the far end, cut in. This is highly irregular. Our lawyers should evaluate any materials beforehand. You've surrendered that privilege, Edmund snapped. Regulators have already seized most of our company's records. We're attempting to comprehend what's unfolding before the markets open, and this company loses half its value. He gestured toward me. The floor is yours. I connected my tablet to the display system. The room dimmed and the screens lit up with the same slides I had begun showing the day before. As I started explaining yesterday before the executive team abruptly exited, I said, my voice unwavering, our quality assurance procedures have been intentionally undermined for roughly 36 months. Over the next 40 minutes, I carefully outlined everything I had uncovered. Altered testing data, concealed incident reports, adjusted safety thresholds. I presented messages confirming intentional suppression of equipment malfunctions, including 3 that had led to patient injuries in hospitals. The board members' expressions shifted from doubt to shock to barely restrained rage. This can't be accurate, argued Vivian when I paused. These are isolated events shown without context. Actually, I said, I haven't even revealed the most alarming evidence. I transitioned to a different series of slides, ones no one had viewed before. These included financial documents outlining suspicious payments to offshore accounts after regulatory inspections, mapping diagrams tying executive bonuses to falsified quality metrics, and email threads discussing strategies to contain potential whistleblowers. "Where did you obtain these?" demanded Monroe, his voice rough. "From your predecessor, Tomas," I answered evenly. Before he was pushed out, he created secured backups of everything. He anticipated being silenced, just not the extent to which you would silence him. I faced the board. Tomas didn't leave due to health complications. He departed because he was cornered. Sign a settlement with a gag order or face fabricated fraud allegations. His final act was encrypting these files with instructions for them to be released to certain individuals if he failed to reset a digital timer each month. "That qualifies as theft of company property," one attorney interjected. Edmund lifted his hand, signaling silence. "Continue, please." When I was hired, I received an anonymous message with access details to these archives. Initially, I suspected it might be a setup, but as my own investigation validated the same patterns Tomas had documented, I understood the truth. I advanced to the next slide. Video footage from my presentation the day before, capturing the moment the executive team walked out along with their dismissive remarks. The crystal-clear audio pulled a heavy, painful silence across the entire room. "You recorded that unlawfully," Baxter snapped. "Actually," I countered, "all conference rooms in this building have automatic recording functions for archival use, as outlined in the Company Policy Manual, Section 4.3. I simply requested access to those archives this morning, and Edmund approved it." Edmund's expression remained unreadable, but the subtle nod he offered said everything. He had been painstakingly thorough in following proper procedures, leaving the company no technical loopholes to wield against us. "This morning," I continued, "federal agents are executing search warrants at 9 executives' homes. They're specifically searching for communications regarding the Cincinnati incident from last year, the one where an operating room equipment failure was blamed on user error despite internal reports proving the opposite." Color drained from several faces around the table. "How do you know about Cincinnati?" Monroe whispered. I tilted my head. "Because I was hired to uncover exactly these kinds of issues. The fact that you attempted to stop me from doing my job never meant that I stopped doing it." For the next hour, the meeting dissolved into pure crisis response. External counsel was contacted, press releases drafted, market analysts notified. Through every frantic moment, I sat silently, watching their world crumble in slow, inevitable motion. By noon, company stock trading had been temporarily halted. By 2, 9 resignation letters had been filed. By 4, federal prosecutors announced preliminary charges against 7 executives, with more looming. As the day drew to a close, Edmund asked me to remain after everyone else had left. "You've been planning this for months," he said once we were alone. It wasn't a question. "Since the 3rd week of my employment," I confirmed. Once I understood what was happening, I had 2 choices: become complicit or bring the entire system down. "You could have come to me directly." I studied him carefully. "Could I have? 3 board members already knew about these issues, Edmund. Their signatures are on the approval forms for the altered testing protocols." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Not all of us knew the extent. Choosing not to know is still a choice." He nodded slowly, accepting the reprimand. "What happens now?" "That depends on you. The company can survive this, but not with the same leadership structure, not with the same priorities. And where do you fit into that future?" I smiled faintly. "I don't. My resignation will be on your desk tomorrow. My part in this is done." The following morning, I watched from my apartment as news channels broadcast footage of executives being escorted from their homes. The company's stock had fallen 42% at opening. Class action lawsuits were already forming. Industry analysts predicted a sweeping leadership overhaul. What none of them understood, what only Tomas, Eliza, and I knew, was that this had never been about vengeance for my humiliation. It had been justice for the patients injured by defective equipment, for the employees threatened into silence, for the entrenched corruption that valued profit over human safety. The revenge wasn't in the public downfall or the criminal charges, as satisfying as those were. The real revenge was that single moment when 12 powerful people exposed their character at once by walking out, convinced their unified stance made them untouchable, never realizing that their synchronized exit was the final piece of evidence we required. They believed they were showing strength. Instead, they sealed their downfall. My phone rang, a number I didn't know. "Is this Leona?" an unfamiliar voice asked. "It is. This is Dr. Harrington from Memorial Hospital. We've been following the news about your former company. Our medical safety board would like to discuss a possible consulting role, helping hospitals identify compromised equipment. Would you be interested?" I smiled. Very much so. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't witnessing your enemy's fall. It's using the ruins they created to build something better. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I'm deeply grateful. The courage to stand against powerful institutions often comes from knowing someone understands your story. Please consider hitting the like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe for more real accounts of corporate justice. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. There is strength in our shared stories. Until next time, remember, no amount of power can withstand the force of truth when it finally breaks loose.